All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another rant pod. You're gonna hear my dog barking in the background because she's a crazy little bitch. But today we're gonna go deep on the Palantir board that I just posted. A couple housekeeping items here. As you can tell, if you are watching the YouTube, I got a new setup. I have an old mic from when I used to make music, and it is kind of a little janky. So if I wiggle it the wrong way, or if I say Palantir the wrong way, it might wig out. And at that point, I will be doing some live troubleshooting. But I can edit this on the back end, so hopefully it's not too often. We're going to see if the sound quality is a little better. I also got a new camera here. And so welcome back. If you want to support the pod, I do have the Patreon link below. Basically, it just helps me with this new equipment, dedicate a little bit more time, energy towards this. But at the end of the day, this shit is just, it gets my blood moving. I don't get tired doing what I love. So I wanted to get a little bit more content out there today. We're talking about the Palantir board, which is up here, and I'm sharing my screen. Ideally, you can see this. If you are on the Spotify and you want to check out on the YouTube to see what I'm showing you, feel free to head on over to Rant. I think it's Rant Board, all one word. Regardless, you should be able to find all my shit in my Instagram profile. So after this, I'm going to be diving into the missing scientists. So I hope to not join them, but we're going to start here with our overlords in Palantir. I'm going to go through the lines here top to bottom and kind of give you some of the other research that I've been doing and more context around it, because I've got about 4 pages of notes here that I summarized again back into that 6-minute video. After that, I'm going to go through just some of the fun content that I was able to find on Alex Karp and Peter Thiel. These dudes are fucking weird. I'm no normal guy myself, but these guys are strange. All right, let's dig into it. So, first and foremost, the PayPal Mafia. If you're not familiar with these guys, you are missing the real power center of the American and probably the global agenda, right? You've got Peter Thiel, you got Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, David Sachs. These are all founders of PayPal, and I'm probably missing a couple in there, but these are the main 4. Obviously, we know Elon, Peter Thiel, not only has started Palantir and Andrill, but also has been involved in a ton of different VC projects. Mark Andreessen similarly is part of Andreessen and Horowitz, and I think it's like A16Z is his other like media company. And then David Sachs is probably the most honest out of all of these guys, but he is the crypto czar for the Trump administration. He usually just says it how it is, even though it's not great. But this dude is filthy rich, probably guilty as everybody else when it comes to insider trading, things like that. So these guys are the PayPal Mafia. Now, this is where essentially Peter Thiel gets his bankroll, and similarly with Elon Musk and all the rest of these guys, is they created a PayPal, which was a really great way for providing payment online. And obviously with that, you have to ensure that you're not going to succumb to fraud. And so what had happened is Peter Thiel was like, hey, I have a really good idea on how we can apply our fraud detection software from PayPal into terrorist detection software for intelligence agencies. And I'm actually going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to share a screen here to show the quote from Alex Karp of when they first got started.
Tell us about the beginning of Palantir. Whose idea was it?
It was Peter's idea, Peter Thiel. He called me, he's like, hey, I've got this great idea. We're going to take the back end that we used at PayPal to stop cyber criminals, and we're going to turn it into a product, and we're going to sell it to the intelligence services. And do you want to co-found this? Yeah, I just said yes. Yes, period. And it wasn't like, what am I getting paid? What's my equity plan?
So there you go. You heard it from Alex Karp himself. They got hit up by the intelligence agency, and they're like, yeah, this seems like a really great investment to start finding terrorists ahead of time. The funniest part about that entire thing is when asked in 2025, basically something along the lines of, is Palantir working with the intelligence agency? The direct quote from Alex Karp is, we are the single worst technology to use to abuse civil liberties, which is, by the way, the reason why we could never get the FBI or NSA to actually buy our product. Karp, 2025, which is a fucking load of shit. Which the idea that you're going to sit there and lie and just overtly lie about that just tells me that it's so much worse than people are getting it credit for. So, yeah, I mean, you should take everything that they say publicly with a grain of salt and know that they're lying straight to your face because they are building the surveillance state. But it's all around this Lord of the. Let's see if I zoom in here. Cool. It's all about the Lord of the Rings naming structure of Palantir, which is the all-seeing eye or the seeing stone within Lord of the Rings. Honestly, I'm ignorant. I've never seen it. Make fun of me, whatever. But apparently, the seeing stone is something that gives tremendous power to anybody who wields it, but it always corrupts the wielder, which is ironic. And then you go into Andrill, which is Palmer Lucky's. He's a CEO of Andrill, who pretty much he was given that position from Peter Thiel after creating the Oculus Rift or the headset for VR, which, I mean, you got to give it to him. That's a pretty impressive piece of technology. Like, to be able to throw that together at such a young age. He's obviously a boy genius, but he's also has like no fucking morals. Like the guy had given an interview. I don't know if it was on Sean Ryan or somewhere else, but Palmer Luckey had said that he wanted to make, because, you know, everybody was trying to make Impossible Burgers and how can we sell meat that's not meat. And a lot of people were pivoting to plant-based stuff, which like it's still edible, right? And then you get this Palmer Lucky fuck who's talking about using petroleum based. And you're like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you want to pump oil into people? And so again, like and he basically was like, and I was going to do it, but the FDA said no. And I said, well, that's stupid. It's super, you know, you can reduce, reuse, recycle. And, you know, it just, you know, it's really easy to make. And so like, these guys just care about profits. They don't care about you. They don't care about your health. They don't care about your rights. They just care about money and being the smartest guy in the room. And so, yeah, so Lord of the Rings naming is everywhere. Even their offices are named after like Lord of the Rings places or characters or things like that. Now, In-Q-Tel, if you're not familiar with In-Q-Tel, that's a freaking rabbit hole for another time too. They have like over 350 plus investments that are out there, 100 of which are still like classified. So this is the private investing arm of the CIA, which you got to think about, like, we fund these institutions through our taxes. And speaking of which, In-Q-Tel has given, or we have given them $1.2 billion in taxes in the last 15 years. Now, the problem with this is that they are a machine that is self-sustaining now because they have their own private investing, which means they're making money. And who better to make money off their investments than the people who are pulling the strings across the planet? So these people are literally like finding these startups or these defense contracting companies and they're dumping a ton of money into it, and or they have like the best and brightest that work for them and they build these things and then sell it to a company so that they could publicly launch it, right? That was Google Earth story. They built Google Earth through satellite imagery and then they gave it to Google. And I'm sure there was some backdoor like deal where they gave them money. But in fact, they had like a bunch of shares of Google knowing that they were going to go, you know, probably their stock would go up when they released that they have Google Earth, right? And so then they sold a bunch of those stocks, made about a couple $1 million. And again, that's just all money that goes back into this private operations, these, you know, black ops type of stuff. Yeah, and then so they call it Q because in James Bond, the person or the little thing that gives them all his fancy technology is called Q, which I learned that and I'm like, what are the odds that it's called Q and then you have QAnon that's supposedly giving all of the information about the deep state and all of this. And then you look back at how much they are curating information. It looked like Cambridge Analytica back in 2019, 2020, that big thing that happened with Trump where they basically manipulated Facebook algorithms and like got a ton of data from a bunch of users on Facebook to then manipulate their feeds in order for them to feel like Trump is the right move. And again, I'm not saying this right, left, or indifferent because I think it's all fucking crock of shit. But it is interesting when you look back to see that Palantir And Peter Thiel and Thiel was involved in getting Trump elected for the first term. And this is allegedly because apparently it was a rogue Palantir employee that helped with Cambridge Analytica. But it all comes back to like, that was still around the same time that Q was coming out and QAnon, and they're talking about how the Democrats were doing a lot of what the fucking Epstein stuff is showing you, but it almost is like selectively trying to push you towards Trump as this outside figure and this savior, when in reality, you look at this last term and he has done the bidding of this PayPal mafia more than, and Israel, more than anybody else I've ever seen in my entire, life or paying attention to politics. It's just on its face. It's so obvious. And they don't even care to lie to you anymore. They don't even, like, at least they sold us the weapons of mass destruction for a couple months before they pushed us into war. And now he's just like, yeah, we don't like them. We're going to topple the regime. Like, they just and it's not voted on by Congress. And again, like, it all comes back to this military industrial complex, which you then look back at Palantir as making so much money. I'm pretty sure like Alex Karp, the guy I just showed you, is worth $18 billion in net worth. Like, it's insane. These people are out of their fucking minds. And not to mention Elon and Mark Andreessen and David Sachs are all up there, right? So these are the folks that are pulling the strings. And you're going to notice as I go through the rest of this board, just how much they're pulling these strings. But in 2004, In-Q-Tel gave them $2 million into Palantir. And then a year later, Jeffrey Epstein gives Peter Thiel and Palantir $40 million. Just so happens maybe that was the kind of back door to say, hey, we don't want to show you too much money, but we want to give you as much as you need to make things work, because this is the surveillance state that we see coming in about 20 years, right? But you then look at 2004, that's also, again, like to his story, that's when Alex Karp gets in the mix. And it's hilarious. You would think that these guys are all like super smart or engineers or tech savvy people, but Alex Karp graduated with a philosophy degree and had no computer science background, no technology background, no military background. He simply has a philosophical vision for what you would imagine is their end goal. Like, it's pretty straightforward. What they're trying to do is at least have some AI governance system where they can take in the pools of data from across the internet and across all of your social media and make decisions off of them. And he sees this, and he, I think, understands Peter Thiel's vision of saying, yes, if the United States does not lead in this regard, then we won't be in control of it. So although maybe they all agree it's bad, they also agree that, like, and you have to, good intentions, right? They probably feel like if they don't do it and somebody else does, it's going to be worse and the US is going to suffer, which they're not entirely incorrect. It's just a shame that it just all ends up at this point. So yeah, you then fast forward to, like I said in that quote, that they would never ever work with the NSA or the FBI. But in 2017, Snowden, in part of his whistleblowing, showed that the NSA is working with them. So again, flat out lie. But the NSA, in quotes, captured nearly everything a user does on the internet. And this would be emails, chats, web traffic, pictures, documents, calls, webcams, searches, keystrokes, etc. This entire podcast. I'm absolutely on a list. But then Palantir's Gotham is their software, their proprietary software that essentially sits on top of that data collection and that aggregation, and it makes it searchable, or it allows for them to visualize that data, which the most difficult piece in any of this is making sense of all of that information. And this is exactly what Palantir has been so successful with. So it looks at the social connections you have in your social sphere. So who are the people that you interact with the most? What type of content are you circulating between them? Who's adjacent to you? Because there's another thing that, like, you got to think about, for instance, like the power structures. If I start making waves, I have a great relationship with my boss, and I have, at the end of the day, like, if shit happens, but I think he'd more or less understand what I'm doing here, and he knows who I am, right? So at the end of the day, if somebody wants to make waves, right, or if even the powers that be want to start sending algorithmic reasons why he shouldn't trust me, like, or my wife, why, like, they start sending her things in her algorithm that might, make her second guess who I am, right? Again, these are the types of things that they can drip out there as long as they know your social connections. And then they put you in these ideological groupings. Now, this is the Cambridge Analytic thing where they would understand who are you and what type of person are you to believe in certain things or not believe in certain things. And then it would steer you towards the type of content that over time would potentially change your mind. Yeah. All right. I'm going to share another video here of Peter Thiel talking exactly about this. Okay. He's saying the quiet part out loud.
Basic idea was that we could never win an election on getting certain things because we were in such a small minority. But maybe you could actually unilaterally change the world without having to constantly convince people and beg people and plead with people who are never going to agree with you through a technological means. And this is where I think technology is this incredible alternative to politics.
That's tech billionaire and
So that was the More Perfect Union. And he, later explains that essentially this is a alternative or replacement for politics, right? So imagine you don't have to convince anybody your ideas are better, and instead you can start to nudge them in the direction that you want them to believe in via algorithms. And this is the surveillance capitalism that a lot of people talk about, except it's pointed at politics in general or the political sphere, right? Like if you can nudge somebody in the direction of wanting Arby's, then you can start to nudge somebody in the direction of wanting Republican, Democrat, specific candidate, etc. And that's exactly what he's talking about. And so, again, it starts to get a little spooky when you know that they're collecting all this information and they group into these ideological spheres. And now they can start to target you based on who you believe in or the types of things that you follow. Like maybe they know that if somebody who likes Fuentes or Candace or Tucker, or on these other Tim Dillon, they understand who you listen to and the types of content that might speak to you, and then they start pushing you things. And then at the end of the day, if you become a target instead of something that you're just driving towards clicks for, they can start pushing you in a direction to believe certain things, or maybe even fucking send you into psychosis, right? Like there's a lot of documented cases of people who just get fed a ton of crazy things in their algorithm to either go into depression or psychosis, etc. They try to break people. And then this is the behavior map. And this is something that like Epstein was trying to figure out with digital twins, where he was like, how can I understand how to biohack somebody? How can I understand if I can mimic all of their behavior and all the things that they do, can I create a digital twin of them so that I can interact with this person before even ever meeting them, so that I know what types of things they would, succeed to or, not contest, and how far I could push the limits before they start to be uncomfortable, right? And this is, again, like this whole digital twin and digital surveillance system is exactly what they're trying to build. And that was the X key score. That was what NASA was doing, plus the Gotham, and that was Snowden in 2017. So again, you start seeing all of this on the domestic side. And again, that was like 10 years ago. Can you imagine what they're doing today? Like that was before like serious AI power. And so it just has to be unreal. But then you get into some of the foreign and domestic, and Pogo and Cypher. And they started working with Ukraine right after the conflict. I think like 3 months after they were invaded. Israel right after October 7th. The Danish government has everything intertwined there. The UK, they are really going for Palantir. So much so there's a lot of outcry right now, specifically on the NHS, which is their medical system. And so Palantir has access to, let's see if I can find it, has access to everything from medical records through to their nuclear systems. Here we go. So they paid him a $900 million contract to integrate Palantir and Gotham into their military, their police, MI6, healthcare, nuclear weapons, etc. And so there's a lot of outcry right now on that specifically. And then that, Australia is part of the Five Eyes, so they're all involved, in Canada as well. Then you look at the Swiss report. And so Switzerland did a 20,000 page report showing that the U.S. can access all of the data that Palantir has access to. So again, it's not a private company. It is the government, and it is the government superseding the constitutional limitations that are put on them by leveraging this private company. And this is something you'll see later on, that it's like, there's whistleblowers, there's former executives coming out saying that they're literally trying to take over the government. It's an occupied nation. It's a vendor lock situation. But the Cloud Act 2018 is what allows for the government to take in that data. And I don't think they're really contesting that anymore because there's so much money in it. You look at the LAPD, domestically in Operation Laser. That was some of the predictive policing minority report, where they basically get this list of community members. They understand risk scores that are based on their license plates, their social media areas, their criminal histories, and they also secretly deployed this in New Orleans. And after some people figured it out and were upset about this, they protested and got it ripped away. But again, like, how, once that cat is out of the bag, it's not going back in. And that is directly adherent to the Fourth Amendment, which there's a loophole, which I'm sure you understand, is that if you, the Fourth Amendment simply states that the government can't track you via data, via whatever they can get their hands on. But this loophole says that they can buy that data from third parties. So if you willingly hit the accept terms and conditions, like we all do, like we have to in order to do any of these things, well, then you also are probably willingly giving away your location data, your third party cookies, the things that you're clicking on, your intent. And then that goes and gets funneled to the highest bidder, which has in past been the DHS, the FBI, ICE, IRS, and Secret Service. Even this February, a $1 billion deal to the DHS with Palantir. So this is big money, big money. Now, if you've heard of Pogo, Pogo and Zephyr are some, fringe theories. They're not substantiated. There's no declassified information on this. This is basically the internet doing what the internet does. And I'm going to be honest, I have no idea if it's real or not, but I can't imagine it's not. And this is why a lot of people, like, if you go on TikTok and you say I have this stuff, I'm getting banned. Like, I already had one account get banned. I was at like 10,000 followers in 15 days and it got axed after I got a little aggressive on Israel. So literally in 20 minutes, I got 3 strikes and they kicked me off. So I had to restart. I'm just inching back to 10K followers now, but it's been shadow banned the entire time. Like, I can barely scratch like 1,500 views on any of these boards. And you guys know, I mean, like, shit sometimes blows up. So the Pogo is, well, I guess both of these came from this guy who had a dead man switch, apparently, where he went out and when he died, released this voice memo saying that this is happening and this is the plan. And Pogo was to go and identify anybody who's a dissentant view or opinion on the government or any of these, clear as day institutions that are trying to take over the planet. And then they would tag them. And then a Zephyr would be an elimination stage. And God knows how they would do that, whether it would be more of like Purge style where you get hit with an EMP and they send these fucking kill squads, whether it's strategic bioweapons that are meant for specific people. I mean, you can get really creative and it's pretty scary. But again, I don't know if that's real or not. And I have to imagine Pogo piece is probably, like, I guarantee you they identify and tag resistant figures. And then I would see what happened with Charlie Kirk, which is hilarious because I don't even think Charlie Kirk is very a resistant figure. But you get into the whistleblowers then. 2025, there was a letter that was written from some former 13 staff members of Palantir's, basically saying that they were collecting biometrics on immigrant children. They were targeting journalists as part of this, we'll call it the Pogo. And then Doge was cutting regulatory bodies that would more or less cover or prevent these types of things, which is, I know a lot of people, and I was fooled by it too. I kind of believed in Elon. I thought he was the one billionaire that was out there like helping us out and pushing for the right types of things. And you have to remember, these people are not your friends. They don't care about you. You look at Neuralink and what could be considered something that if you don't have it, you might not be able to participate in commerce, and something like the central bank digital currency. You look at Mr. Beast now pushing this. And again, I think there's some really great, wonderful use cases for Neuralink, like that Nolan kid who now can, function. That's amazing. But this is a slippery slope. And Elon, again, I think there's always yin and yang, there's black and white, but I don't think what he was doing in the government was helping anybody. Is there a lot of fraud? Yes. Has there always been a lot of fraud? Yes. Is there still a lot of fraud? Absolutely. He just kind of cut out maybe the stuff that could be considered checks and balances for some of this. Nonetheless, in this letter, a lot of people were upset about what he was cutting out specifically because they saw it as a direct connection or correlation to what Palantir is doing or being allowed to do. Now, a former executive came out and said, and this is, again, I don't know if this is somebody who was on the record, but they said they intended to take over the government. And he called it an occupied nation. Now, what this actually looks like on paper is what you could call vendor lock. And this is where a vendor becomes so important to the structure or the operation within call it a company or call it the government, that you literally, you can't rip that vendor out without severe consequences or a lapse in coverage. Now imagine you have a MSP that you're working with and they operate your entire infrastructure. You can't just kick them out. If you don't have anybody who could like take over, well, you're going to be hurting. Now it's the same thing, except it's embedded in our intelligence agency, in our government, in our defense, and all of that. And so there's been a lot of treasury, former treasurers from the United States government that come out and called it captured, right? And then you look at some of these contracts and they're already spending, I think as of like 2025, so this is not even considering anything that's new, but $10 billion with the Army. They have a $30 million contract with ICE. You can imagine what they're doing with that. Thousands of police departments are using that Gotham software, likely to do things like they were doing in LAPD. And it's a rotating door, right? Everybody from Palantir is working at the CIA, vice versa, DOD, White House, Congress. You have, I'm going to find this one for you. Okay, so then the Tech Transparency Project said that in February 2025, Palantir has a severe conflict of interest as there is a rotating door between the White House, Defense Department, CIA, and Congress. The Chief Digital and AI Office is literally responsible for combining military and commercial tech. And Greg Little, one of the first to run that department, joined Palantir in 2023. David Spirk is the chief defense officer now in Palantir, and he left the Pentagon in 22. You have Rep. Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin represent, and he is the head of defense now for Palantir. He was actually instrumental, I think, also in the TikTok sale, along with some other people, which is just... TikTok sucks since then, if you know what I'm talking about. 2025, the Army swore in CTO Shyam Sankar to embed the Silicon Valley into the military. And this is a part of the Detachment 201 protocol, which essentially now you don't have to have military expertise or experience to be a colonel in the military or have these senior positions. And I'm ignorant when it comes to these military positions, but I know damn well you can't just come in from the outside and be a colonel. Now with this Detachment 201, if you're a tech bro, if you know something about technology, you can. And I guess that makes sense. I get it. But there should be some checks and balances about just like flooding in these tech giant billionaire folks into the government and starting to create alliances or allegiances to these outside private organizations. This defense contracting firms are just everywhere. So now we can all agree that it's embedded in the government. A lot of people have vendor lock fears that you're not going to be able to get Palantir out. And this is where a lot of people in that Tech Transparency Act, I think that was what it's called, well, whatever it was, have pointed out that Palantir is now taking advantage of that. So they understand that they're more or less, can push the limits a little bit, because what are they going to do? Kick them out? And so this is where you start to see a little bit more of bold decision makings, and you see the Alex Karps just going crazy. Let me see if I can play another video of just like the type of guy this dude is. Okay. Let's share my screen here. So this is Alex Karp in a nutshell.
Annoying each other 10 years ago. Hopefully I'm annoying you as much as 10 years ago or more. When I made this, yeah. Every decision Palantir made, FDAs, going public, building products, enterprise, large data sets, going to government, acknowledging American superiority, being pro-meritocracy, launching an AI platform, calling into question that AI models would actually be able to perform without orchestration. Every single one, our ontology, every single one of those was when we began talking.
Yeah, so dude's tweaking, just absolutely tweaking. And this is the guy that's in charge of like this surveillance state thing that they're propping up. So it's all spooky. So then you look at the Vance Thiel relationship. Now this one's super sus, dude. And like you look at all of this and how orchestrated it is and how much of a theater gig it is. In 2011, 2011, Vance met Thiel at a talk that Thiel was giving at Yale, and then proceeded to work for Peter Thiel from at that talk, he got Vance a job at this biomedical company he owned. 3 years later, after working there for 3 years, joined Mithral Capital, which is the VC firm that Thiel owned. And then prior to writing Hillbilly Elegy, Vance started a VC fund of his own, backed by Thiel and Mark Andreessen. So it's just like he's embedded in this PayPal mafia. And And then you look at like how many of you have changed your names like 6 times? How many of you are also the VP of the United States, one of the most powerful countries in the world? And you look at just like the theater again, they're all fucking theater kids, and they just get paid by these billionaires to do their bidding. So you look at it. He was born James Donald Bowman. He didn't like his dad. He had a bad relationship with his dad, so he changed his last name to Hamill. I understand that. Sure, that's understandable. One time, right? Well, then he changes his middle name from Donald to David, James David Hamill. Okay, maybe there's a backstory there. Sure, give it that. And then he changed his last name to Vance because he thought it would sound more like hillbilly elegy or hillbilly-ish. That was right before his book. And you only get to change your last name once. And, and it better be like Meta World Peace or some shit. So then he's James David Vance. And then before he ran for Senate, changed his name to J.D. Vance. In the Senate race, he was given $15 million from Peter Thiel, which is the highest amount of money anybody's ever received for a Senate race campaign. And then you see J.D. Vance is talking about how Trump was Hitler in the beginning of his political career. And then in 2021, he introduced Vance to Trump where they can make amends. And then 2024, Peter Thiel said you should pick Vance for your VP. And of course Trump would, because again, he's getting a ton of fucking money. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy, man. And then 72 hours after Charlie Kirk's assassination, this one was spooky. The Kirk Vance domain was purchased. Now, who did that? I don't know. But it's pretty clear that they weren't talking about Charlie Kirk at the time. So Erica was supposed to be this new presidential figure because she's the widow, the grieving widow. It was a perfect story. J.D. Vance, he was, I guess somewhat respected still, even though, he's good speaker, well articulated in some of the things that he's trying to get across, but he's just too mixed into all of this bullshit. Obviously, he's not in the Epstein files, but he's covering it up. They're participating in this Iran war and the genocide. And so I don't see any future with him, especially as Erica Kirk's just getting demolished from, Candace and some of the memes that are out there. I mean, she's not doing herself any favors, but yeah, it's just pretty spooky how that all come together. But you look at Thiel on the Antichrist, actually, let's start at the top here. We'll get back to that. So these PayPal Mafia folks also started Pronomos Capital, which if you want a big deep dive into this, Zachary Loft, he does a really fantastic job. And part of where Thiel was going for initially was in 2008, he founded the Seasteading Institute, which the idea was to make seafaring, call it like cities or states that would operate under its own legal body and would be essentially their own country, just be out in the sea somewhere. And he realized that this wasn't really that doable or feasible, probably due to like getting in energy and ensuring that he can get enough supplies in there. And so then they pivoted to Pronomos Capital, which started with Honduras. I know I spelled Honduras wrong. I realize that. Again, that's not my strong suit. But Prospera was their first iteration of this freedom city. That's what you can essentially call it. And they wanted to essentially build their own land that operated under their own laws, that had their own private way of governing. And so I'm going to play a little clip of this that I think illustrates it pretty well.
Prosper is the first time in human history that a group of people have said there's a way to deliver governing services privatized, for profit, in a completely free market way.
We are skeptical, we are afraid.
So they just will come in and say, we like it, here is what we give you for your land, and we can't do anything.
And I'm against expropriation as a matter of principle.
I mean, there you go.
Milímetro de la patria que usurparon en nombre de la sacrosanta libertad del mercado.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you get the gist of it. A bunch of rich assholes come in, they take your land for next to nothing, knowing that they could profit off of it using their government connections to make it into legislation, and then they put together this Bitcoin-backed, completely liberty-focused freedom city where they just use AI to monitor everybody and have a complete control as a test pilot for things that they can do in the US in these Western countries. So, yeah, I mean, so the story goes Juan Hernandez was the leader of Honduras at the time. when they wanted to do this. And so they put together this legislation that guaranteed 50 years of stability for these things called ZEEDs, or essentially it's the zoning economic development, something, something, something. And that's what this was, is they wanted to come in here and they wanted to privatize government, essentially. And it would be privatized for profit in a completely free market way. But these people had no choice in it, and it was just kind of pushed on them. So when Juan Hernandez was pushed out and voted out, the new person who came in there said it was completely unconstitutional, and they backed out. And then so you have Pronomos Capital. Then, since they were founded in Delaware, essentially they can say that this was a U.S. investment in a foreign country, so then they can push on Honduras, saying that you guys like lost us $10 billion in future profit. And then that was increased to $26 billion this last year. And so that would be 1/3 of the GDP of Honduras. So if they imagine that they paid that, like, you can't do that. It's holding somebody hostage. It's bullying with money. And that's what these people do. And so then Honduras withdrew from this governing body, this like global bank that would require for them to do this, but they're still not off the hook. So Juan Hernandez later, funny enough, gets extradited on a gun and drug trafficking charge, which then Trump pardoned him in December of last year. Like, there's no reason for Trump to do that outside of the fact that he wants to repay the guy who helped out the PayPal Mafia, who eventually will probably own him and pay for everything he does. And it's like, as soon as you start seeing all these threads and the Vance thread, it's so clear that none of these people are in charge. You're not voting red or blue. You're voting for the PayPal Mafia one way or another, whether you like it or not. That's why we're so adherent to Israel. I think they're all very avid Zionists, and they want to create this Middle East freedom city that is the world trade hub, where they can funnel trade from Asia, from Europe, from Africa, from the Western Hemisphere, and it all comes into Greater Israel, or the ancient Babylon, if you want to get back to maybe the Rothschilds and the Freemasons who want to bring back the Third Temple. They might all have different alignments and ways they want to do it, but it all comes back to a total governing system across the entire planet, leveraging AI surveillance. Now, this is something also you saw with Greenland. This is exactly what they wanted to do with Greenland, similarly, because they have weak laws to protect their citizens. And I'm sure that there's probably somebody out there, again, Zach Loft does a really great job breaking this down, but there's somebody out there who would give the same type of playbook that they did in Honduras. That's why Trump was pushing to acquire Greenland. So you look at this guy, Curtis Yarvin. Oh, man. I would love to. I'm going to listen to some interviews from him, because he seems like an interesting cat that JD Vance has quoted. Trump had him at his inauguration ball, and he has this idea, neo-cameralism. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But it's what this is. It's the freedom cities. It's the privatized government. And so instead of a government owning the state or the country, right, like you're not going to have Honduras or the Honduran government. You have a corporation, you have Palantir, you have Google. Google owns this land. And so you don't get to vote on the CEO. The CEO is the CEO, and he's put in place from the rest of the board members or whoever's in charge. And then they're essentially provisioning the healthcare, the housing, the laws, the work that's available. And you are not a citizen, you are a customer. This is modern day indentured servitude. That's exactly what this is. And this is where they're pushing. This is the PayPal Mafia. This is what they want to bring. This is the total control, the social credit. All of this comes into play when you move towards this. And then when you see the embedded nature of Palantir in our government, this is where it's going. We are becoming this, where it's Peter Thiel and Alex Karp are our president and our vice president, because they have all the money, they have all the influence, they have all the infrastructure, they have all of the defense contractors at their back, they have all of the global connections that they need, they have all the money. And then all they need is a disaster, a good chaotic situation to take over and provide this governing system for safety and security, which then you get into Thiel on the Antichrist. That's exactly what he says. He believes that it'll be a system. It is not a person. He believes that it's going to promise false peace and safety. This is when you get into that total planetary governance, call it. And he talks about the Cation. I think I'm mispronouncing that probably, but it's the prevention of the Antichrist. And in his words, it's via control, more or less, like some autonomy, right? And I think the way he thinks about it is if he builds this first, and what Alex Karp has said, that we have to dominate, the U.S. has to be the person to do this. If he builds it first, well, then it's not an antichrist, it's his. But in reality, he is building exactly what he fears. And I don't know if that's a defense mechanism, if he just thinks he's better. And that gets back into the Lord of the Rings, man. Like, I've never seen it, but what I heard is like Gandalf tries to use the Seeing Stone to protect whatever, place. And so is he using this to protect the West, or is he going to end up like Saruman, who gets corrupted, right? And that's essentially Palantir in a nutshell. I do have a couple things, especially when we're talking about the Antichrist. Here is him kind of squirming in the seat when somebody asked him about it.
Story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world. I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
Oh, ain't that the case, man?
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're doing. Here's one that should just make you like question who the hell this guy is. Here's Peter Thiel talking about if he doesn't know if the human race should survive.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions.
Questions on what? The question was, do you want the human race to survive? What? What are you talking about, dude? Yeah, and then the last thing I'll end on is something that Breaking Point's actually reported on today, and I think this is actually relevant news, which is and I haven't read this yet, but this is their manifesto on AI and the future of the West. Now, one thing to think about is like manifesto usually isn't released until after the act is done, so this is kind of just a precarious way to go about saying probably what's already in play. And by the way, Breaking Points is awesome. Shout out Breaking Points. But I'm going to read these top to bottom. Silicon Valley owes a moral debt to the country that made its rise possible. The engineering elite of Silicon Valley has an affirmative obligation to participate in the defense of the nation. Number 2, we must rebel against tyranny of the apps. Is the iPhone our greatest creative, if not crowning achievement as a civilization? The object has changed our lives, but it may also now be limiting and constraining our sense of the possible. 3, free email is not enough. The decadence of culture or civilization, and indeed its ruling class, will be forgiven only if that culture is capable of delivering economic growth and security for the public. The number 4, the limits of soft power, of soaring rhetoric alone have been exposed. The ability of free and democratic societies to prevail requires something more than moral appeal. It requires hard power, and hard power in this century will be built on software. 5, the question is not whether AI weapons will be built, it is who will build them and for what purpose. Our adversaries will not pause to indulge in theatrical debates about the merits of developing technologies with critical military and national security applications. They will proceed. Yeah, no fucking shit, because we're doing it. It's the same reason why everybody wants a nuclear weapon, because if they don't, we come in there and we sodomize them to death. This is so stupid, but they're not wrong. It's not, it's an arms race. It is. And that should terrify you. Number 6, national service should be a universal duty. We should, as a society, seriously consider moving away from all volunteer force and only fight the next war if everyone shares in the risk and the cost. Are you out of your mind? So they're saying that everybody should be enrolled in this draft, which I think is probably the reason that Trump made it a thing for December 2026 this year, that you are automatically enrolled in the draft if you are ages 18 to 25. I bet you didn't know that. That is terrifying. That's awful. Okay, so I wonder if they're going to be fighting. Do you think Alex Karp and Peter Thiel are going to be out in the front lines? Do you think their kids are going to be out in the front lines? Do you think the Trump family is going to be out there? Like, this is such ludicrous. This is just saying that poor people should go fight the wars. And yeah, we're going to go make you go on, fuck. We're going to war with Iran. We're going to get boots on the ground. 7. If a U.S. Marine asks for a better rifle, we should build it. And the same debate goes for software. And the same goes for software. We should carry as a country capable of continuing a debate about the appropriateness of military action abroad while remaining unflinching in our commitment to those who we have asked to step into harm's way. Okay. 8, public servants. 7 is just a cope for 6. 8, public servants need to be our priests. Need not be our priests. Any business that compensated its employees in a way that the federal government compensates public servants would struggle to survive. What? Is that? Let me read that again. Any business that compensated its employees in the way that the federal government compensates public servants would struggle to survive. I can't tell if that's saying we should not pay them as much as we are, or if they're saying that they should pay them more, because the way that I see our public servants is that they all participate in insider trading and make millions of dollars, and on a salary of $100,000 and $200,000 a year, which is more than enough. By the way, it's more than a fuck enough. You should be doing this out of the kindness of your heart because you want to serve the people, not because you want to make a fuck ton of money. That's exactly why we have the Nancy Pelosi's, the Dan Crenshaws, all the fucking idiots that are out there just looking to make a quick buck, allegedly. And so, okay. Well, there's the manifesto from Palantir. Isn't that just wonderful? Yeah, I'm sure Sagar's got a great perspective on this. He's awesome. Thanks for the support. 3 things. If you are a musician, my dad owns a music store. It's called Mass Music, MassMusic.com. I put together the website. It works really, really great. Help him out. Get out there. Buy all your gear from him. Support the pod by supporting the father. Also have about 7 songs that I just put out. They all sound pretty damn good. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the music, you can find it at KOLE. And last but not least, I have a business called Home Base Enablement. So what I'm doing here is something I hopefully, can find some success in, because I think the mission is strong. And you can go and visit the website by homebasemke.com, HOM. And my goal here is to start providing some AI education and building new functional websites, lowering the total cost of ownership for small business owners that are trying to compete with these larger enterprises. As you've probably seen, PE firms are consolidating and grabbing up organizations left and right. And it's harder and harder for smaller businesses to compete, especially when you have tools like HubSpot, Salesforce, and some of these other, QuickBooks even, which is pretty affordable. But again, it adds up. And so if you can lower your total cost of ownership and you can consolidate using new AI tools while also getting a brand new brand refresh and website, win-win-win. So that's what I've been doing. It's relatively cheap, $3,000 to $10,000 for a brand new website, roping in your ERP, your CRM, your quoting tools, your booking, and making it possible to operate your business using only one platform, which is one that you custom built that's ready for what you need. So visit the website. Let me know if you have any help that you need. Other than that, thanks for watching, and we will be on to scientists shortly. See you later.